Most sad movies are just tearjerkers. They make you cry, then you move on. But a rare few films don't just make you feel, they infect you, hollow you out, and leave a stain on your soul. And Life Goes On shows you a natural disaster through the eyes of survivors, but its real horror is how life does go on, oblivious to individual suffering. Then there's The Boys of St. Vincent, a film so unflinching about institutional abuse that watching it feels like complicity. These are devastating, but they're just the appetizer. The number one film is so bleak and morally twisted that by the end, you'll feel complicit in its horrors. Imagine watching a movie about the end of the world. Now imagine watching it through the eyes of a child. And Life Goes On, directed by Abbas Kiarostami, is part of his Koker trilogy. It's set in the aftermath of the 1990 Manjil-Rudbar earthquake in Iran. But this isn't about destruction. It's about the tiny, almost absurd, persistence of life. The film follows a director and his son driving through the devastated landscape to find the two child actors from Kiarostami's previous film, Where is the Friend's Home? Along the way, they encounter survivors. And here's the surprising fact. Kiarostami shot the film just months after the quake, using real survivors as extras. He even had them reenact their own experiences. That's not exploitation. It's a form of therapy. The film has no dramatic rescue, no heroic speech, just broken walls, a mother mourning, a boy carrying a soft drink. The emotion is cumulative. You wait for a breakdown that never comes. Instead, there's a wedding. Two people, having lost everything, decide to marry. Why? Because life inexplicably goes on. The film earned a special jury prize at Cannes. Roger Ebert called it one of the most moving films I have ever seen. What makes it unique is its refusal to manipulate. It trusts you to find meaning in the ordinary. The director and his son get lost multiple times. They ask for directions from villagers who have nothing but still offer tea. That's the emotional impact. You realize resilience isn't loud, it's a shared glass of tea. At number 5, this film destroys you gently. It doesn't make you cry for the victims. It makes you cry for the living, because living is harder. By the end, the title And Life Goes On isn't a cliche, it's a mystery. How do people keep going? The film doesn't answer. It just shows you, and that's enough. If you thought this film was devastating, wait until you see what comes next. What if the most terrifying thing isn't an earthquake but a family secret? One so dark it makes this look almost hopeful. You watch a child's face, pure, trusting, as a priest tells him God is watching. And you know what's coming. The director made you sit through the build-up, the slow creeping dread, because he wanted you to feel the air leave the room. That's the genius of The Boys of St. Vincent. It never shows the worst violence. It shows the silence after. It shows boys walking home in the snow, their coats unzipped, their eyes empty, and that is far, far worse. Based on the real Mount Cashel orphanage scandal in Newfoundland, this 1992 Canadian film was so devastating that the government temporarily blocked its broadcast, not because it was inaccurate, but because it was too accurate. The actors who played the boys were not told the full extent of the abuse until after filming. The director, John N. Smith, wanted raw, unguarded reactions. One scene required a boy to simply stand in a hallway for 12 minutes waiting. That waiting, that stillness, generated a tension so unbearable that crew members had to leave the set. Audiences at screenings wept. Some walked out. Critics called it the most important film about institutional abuse ever made. But the real horror? The real horror is not the one perpetrator, it's the system that protected him. In the film, the bishop, the police, the community, they all look away. After its release, the actual Mount Cashel case was reopened, and the film was cited as a catalyst for public outrage. It holds a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, but that number feels wrong. How do you rate something that cuts this deep? At number 4, The Boys of St. Vincent earns its place. Because it doesn't just show trauma, it gives you the weight of 40 years of silence in a single shot. By the end, you're not crying for the child on screen, you're crying for the child who never told anyone. And then the credits roll over a black screen, and you sit there, alone, wondering how a movie could make you feel this responsible. If you thought this film was painful, the next one doesn't let you breathe until a man is buried alive by his own family. You can feel it in your bones. The claustrophobia, the violence, the cycle of hatred that never seems to end. American Me isn't just a gangster movie. It's a tragedy that leaves you breathless. Edward James Olmos directed and starred in this 1992 masterpiece, but he didn't just play the lead. He lived it. Olmos spent years researching, even consulting with real ex-gang members from the Mexican Mafia. The result? A film so authentic that gang members reportedly sent him death threats for revealing too much. Here's what you probably didn't know. American Me is based on a true story. The character of Santana is loosely inspired by Rodolfo Cheyenne Cadena, a founding member of the Mexican Mafia. But the film goes deeper than most crime sagas. It doesn't glorify gang life. It dissects it. We see Santana's father, a Zoot Suit riots victim, beaten by sailors. We see his mother, broken. We see the prison system that forges monsters. The film's most harrowing scene? Santana's first sexual encounter in prison. A brutal rape that shapes his entire identity. It's not gratuitous. It's a gut punch that explains everything. Audiences couldn't handle it. American Me earned $13 million domestic, a modest sum for 1992, but its impact was seismic. Critics praised Olmos' unflinching eye, but viewers walked out. Some said it was too violent, others said it was too real. And here's the behind-the-scenes gut kick. Olmos originally wanted to end the film with a note of hope, but after screening it for ex-gang members, they told him that's not how it works, so he changed the ending. The result is devastating. You don't walk away feeling good. You walk away feeling hollow. That's why it's number 3. Because American Me doesn't let you off the hook. It forces you to stare at the cycle of violence and recognize that some chains can't be broken. The final shot, I won't spoil it, but it's one of the most haunting images in cinema. A young boy, maybe 10 years old, already wearing the gang colors. The cycle never ends, and you sit there, credits rolling, wondering, is this a movie or a warning? If you thought a prison gang's stranglehold on a community was devastating, wait until you see a family torn apart by something even more invisible. The next film makes American Me look like a walk in the park. Picture this, a red wagon flying through the air, 2 brothers, a pact, and an escape from a monster. Radio Flyer isn't just a film. It's a gut punch that stayed buried for decades waiting to be rediscovered. Released in 1992, it was directed by Richard Donner, the man behind Superman and The Goonies. But this isn't a feel-good adventure. It's a raw, unflinching look at childhood trauma, disguised as a fantasy. Here's what you might not know. The film was heavily cut by the studio. The original ending was darker, more ambiguous. But even the sanitized version leaves a scar. The lead actor, Elijah Wood, was just 11, and his performance as Mike is heartbreakingly real. The behind-the-scenes truth? The scene where the wagon flies? That was a combination of wires and miniatures, but the emotional weight came from Wood's own experiences. He understood loss. The film bombed at the box office, earning only $4.6 million on a $35 million budget. Critics called it uneven, but audiences who saw it were shattered. Why? Because it tackles the most taboo subject, child abuse, shown not in violence but in the shadows, in the silences. The stepfather, played by Adam Baldwin, is a monster you never forget, not because he's loud, but because he's terrifyingly calm. The film's unique angle is the power of imagination as survival. Mike and his younger brother Bobby turn their trauma into a myth, that their wagon can fly to safety. It's a metaphor that punches harder than any explicit scene. This belongs at number 2 because it's a masterpiece of emotional sleight of hand. You think you're watching a kid's movie, but you're actually watching a cry for help. The ending? No spoilers, but it's one of the most devastating in cinema. You'll never look at a wagon the same way. This film matters because it gives a voice to the voiceless and reminds us that some pains don't have a happy ending. They just have flight. If you thought this was intense, wait until you see what lies ahead. The next film doesn't just break your heart, it shatters your entire worldview. It's the kind of movie that makes Radio Flyer look like a walk in the park. Stay with me. The camera doesn't blink. It follows Benoit, a serial killer who charms and murders with equal ease. You're not watching a horror movie, you're watching a documentary crew become complicit. Man Bites Dog doesn't just show violence, it makes you laugh at it. Then it makes you feel sick for laughing. This is the film that breaks every rule, and it will break you too. Made for a paltry $15,000, shot in grainy black and white on 16mm film, this 1992 Belgian mockumentary feels like home video from hell. The directors, Remy Belvaux, André Bonzel, Benoit Poelvoorde, played the crew themselves, and Poelvoorde's Benoit is improvisational, terrifying, and weirdly magnetic. But here's the behind-the-scenes shocker. Belvaux, who co-directed and starred, died by suicide at age 36, just a few years after the film's release. Some say the role consumed him, others blame the weight of what they created. The film famously had no script for the dialogue. Poelvoorde ad-libbed almost everything, including his poetic monologues. The crew would set up a scene, and he'd unleash. That raw unpredictability is what makes the violence feel so real. Audiences at Cannes didn't know what hit them. Some walked out, others were paralyzed. Critics called it nihilistic, irresponsible, a masterpiece. Roger Ebert gave it a thumbs up but admitted, "It left me feeling depressed and unclean." The film grossed over $2 million worldwide on that shoestring budget, becoming a cult sensation. But its real legacy is how it weaponizes your own empathy. You start by laughing at Benoit's jokes. Then he kills a mailman and the crew helps dispose of the body. You're still chuckling. Then he rapes a woman on camera and the crew films it. The laughter dies. You realize you've been complicit. That's the point. The film doesn't judge. It implicates. That's why it's number one. No other film makes you feel so dirty for simply watching. The final act is a descent into hell. The crew stops being bystanders and becomes participants. By the end, you're not sure who the monster is. The film leaves you with a hollow silence, a dread that sits in your chest. It matters because it forces you to confront the voyeur in yourself. Man Bites Dog isn't entertainment. It's a mirror. And when you look away, you see a version of yourself you don't want to know. These 5 films share a devastating core. They force us to confront how innocence is stolen, whether through war, abuse, or societal collapse. And life goes on, and The Boys of St. Vincent show survival amid unspeakable grief, while American Me and Man Bites Dog indict the systems that create monsters. Radio Flyer cuts deepest. It's a child's fantasy masking a horror we're too afraid to name. As an audience, we're drawn to these stories not for morbid curiosity, but because they remind us that empathy is our only shield. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these films shattered you most, and was there a single scene that wrecked you? Drop your answer below. And if you lived through something similar, share only what feels safe. This community listens. Subscribe so we can keep facing the darkness together.